Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. As promised, this is the sew along for the Night Before Christmas fabric book panel. All I've done so far is just iron this to get all of the wrinkles out from where they folded it. I did get this panel from Hobby Lobby, however, when I looked it up online, I think there was someone who also had this for sale on Etsy, if I remember correctly. So when you get this, when you come up here, it will tell you the supplies that you need to buy in order to make this. The only thing they're saying you need is needle punch fleece or low loft batting. You need 1 yard of that. I'm going to be using this batting that I picked up from Hobby Lobby that same day that I was there. So this is Hobbs Heirloom Premium Cotton Batting. I picked up a big like a wide roll of it. I got 90 inch by 108 inch because I'm going to be making multiple projects out of it. You don't need one that's that big. They did have one in a bag that was the exact size of a panel. A panel is 36 by 44 inches. So if all you're going to be doing is a regular panel, or you're just going to be cutting pieces like this out of one of those, just one that size would probably be enough. But I am using this one. So when you come over to here, this gives you all of your instructions for how to put this book together. So it does say a 1/4 inch seam is already included. You can see it marked out over here, so we don't have to measure our seam allowance and chalk it on or anything like that. It's already there for us. And whenever you flip the fabric to the back, all of the markings are visible through there, so you can see your seam allowance even whenever you're going to have these with the wrong sides facing you, which is when you're sewing. So it tells you cut 3 rectangles from needle punch fleece. 1 is supposed to be the same size as the covers, which are marked up here. This is your inner cover, and then the black one over there is your outside cover. So we need 1 piece of that batting that's that size. And then it says we need 2 cut to the same size as the inner pages that are going to be inside the book. Then you're going to place your pages and your covers with the right sides together, which means that this piece here, where the design is nice and bright and vibrant, is going to lay against this vibrant side here. So all you're going to see are the dull sides of both of those pages. So whatever you do with the pages, you also do with your covers. So they're going to be laid with the wrong sides together too. So then it says which order your pages are supposed to go in. So pages 1 and 8, and they are marked. So like this one here says 7 and 2. So page 1 and 8 gets attached to page 2 and 7. And page 3 and 6 gets attached to page 4 and 5, and then of course your inner and outer cover get attached to each other. So it says you pin your corners first and then down your sides. Then it says you may need to adjust to make sure that your corners and your edges all meet. So you may have to do a little bit of fiddly work with them to make them line up. Then you're going to place those pieces, your pages and your covers that have already been pinned together, on top of your piece of fleece or batting. And then you're going to stitch all around that seam allowance that's already marked for you. They're saying to stitch, whenever you get them, just up the sides and the top of the page, and they're leaving the whole bottom open and then flipping it inside out and hand sewing the bottom. I'm not going to do that whenever I do mine. I'm going to sew about 3/4 of the way around. I'm going to leave myself about maybe a 4 or 5 inch opening to turn that right side out, because I don't like hand stitching. I find it tedious, so I want to do as little of it as possible. So when I do mine, and you guys will see this, I'm only going to leave about 4 or 5 inches open instead of the entire bottom. You'll flip them right side out, you will hand sew that opening closed, and then you're going to lay them on top of each other in the order that they're supposed to go through. So it says fold your center page in half to mark the center line, and if you look up here, I'll move that out of the way. On the outside cover, don't know how well it's going to show up on the camera, but you can see little white stitch marks. That marks for you the center of the book. So whenever you fold your pages, just try to keep your center on that stitch line. But I'll show you all of that whenever we actually put it together. Then it says pin through the center of all of your pages, fold your book closed and make sure that they're all in the correct order and that they line up. Reopen the book and then stitch down the center of the pages through all layers on the center line to secure them together. Now, on your machine, you'll want to use a microtex needle or a machine quilting needle because they are made with super sharp tips and they are designed to go through multiple layers of fabric and batting. So you will want a super sharp, they may be labeled as sharp on the package, machine quilting, or just quilting needle, or microtex needle. That's what you want to look for on the outside of your pack. So we are going to go ahead and get started on cutting these out, and when you cut them, you do not cut on this dashed line. This is your seam allowance, that's your sewing line. The solid line out here, this is your cutting line. So we're going to get started on that. I will show you real quick what I mean by those needles. Okay, so I have some needles here. These are my microtex needles. This is where you'll find the label that I'm talking about. It will either say microtex or sharp. It will say machine quilting or just quilting. Any of those will work because they are made super sharp on the tips and they're made to go through multiple layers of fabric and batting. I'm using the microtex ones because this is what my store had. I picked these up from Walmart. When you look down here on the bottom, this 80 and 1280 is the European sizes. We don't pay attention to those here in the US. We pay attention to the 12, and the only thing that 12 means, it is the gauge of your needle, so it's how big around the needle is. 12 is a standard size for a needle, a 12 or a 14. Here I have like some jersey needles. These are for sewing like knit fabrics and stretchy things. They do also have specific stretch needles. And you'll see some of these are size 10, some are 12, and then I have a 14 in there. So whenever you go and you're looking for the size on the needles, only pay attention to the bottom number. If you live in the US, European countries, and I think Australia, they use the upper numbers. But that's what that means. So for this project, you're going to be going through multiple layers because you're doing multiple pages. You want super sharp needles like microtex or machine quilting. Okay, so I have all of my pieces cut out. Now it says we need one piece of batting or your needle punched. I forget what the other word was. It's on the instructions. We're using batting for this one, so I need one piece the size of the covers, and then I need two pieces the size of the inner pages. So all I've done is I've laid my cover on top of it here, and now this batting is pretty thin. If you just wanted your pages to be thin, you would just lay it on a single layer. The book that they actually had as an example in Hobby Lobby that showed how this was made was actually pretty puffy. The pages were nice and cushiony, and so all I did was, I'm making mine 2 layers. I just folded this over my batting So you take this, fold it over the same size as the page, and then I'm just going to cut this out as one piece, and then I am going to have the double layer of batting inside. If you just want the single layer, if that's easier for you, go ahead and do that. The only thing I would say is don't buy a batting that is super puffy, because you're going to run into problems lining up the corners of your fabric whenever you do that and trying to sew it and flip it inside out. Okay, so we have our batting cut out for the pages. Over there I have the cover, the back cover anyway, stuck on the piece of batting that was cut for the cover size. So now looking at our instructions, we are supposed to put pages 1 and 8 and 2 and 7 together. So this one here says it is our inside front cover on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead, it says to lay them right sides together, which means that the vibrant sides should be together like this. Take them off the batting because that's how it says to do it. Alright, I'll get those lined up how they're supposed to be in a minute. So I've got my covers together. So now 1 and 8 and 2 and 7. So this is 2 and 7 here. And that's marked on the bottoms of the pages. So 2 and 7. And 1 and 8 is right here on top. And you can see those page numbers down there in the corner. So there's 8 and 1. This one is 2 and 7, so they're supposed to be right sides together again. We will get all the corners set how they're supposed to be in a second. And then we have pages 3 and 6 and 4 and 5 are what's left, and they go together with the right sides down. Okay, so next step is getting your little pins here. It says to pin the corners first and then adjust your sides. Okay, so I have all of the pages pinned, and I don't think I showed this earlier, but if you're having trouble getting your edges lined up, each of these pages has like a black dash mark in the center of the page. Those are there to help you line them up, so you can see you line up the dash mark with this page with the dash mark of the other page. So that is there to help you line up your edges also. And then it says just to lay these pinned pieces on top of your batting that's been cut for that size. Or your needle punched fleece was the other one that they said. I'm using this cotton batting, and one thing that is nice about batting is that it holds your fabric in place once it's on there. So you just kind of smooth that onto there, press it down as you smooth it, and then that cotton will make like a grip on there on its own. See, it's coming up with it. So that is not going to slide around on top of there. And we are ready to go over to the sewing machine. Okay, so we are ready to sew. The pattern itself tells you to leave the whole bottom open and just sew the top and the sides. I actually am just going to leave myself a opening on the bottom to flip it right side out through. So I'm going to start sewing about halfway down the page on the bottom. And we're going to follow the stitch line that is given to us. And then give yourself a few back stitches at the place where you're going to turn it right side out. If you don't give yourself some back stitches right there, then while you're trying to turn this inside out, the stitching will start to come undone. And if you need to readjust your fabric while you sew, that's perfectly fine. Not quite to the line. Okay, and when we get to this end here on this last side, we're going to give it some more back stitches. Alright, so that is our corner. And again, that's just to keep this from coming unraveled whenever we flip it right side out. So here is the stitching end there, and then on this side, so we have this gap here is an open hole when I take this pin out. And that is what we are going to use to turn this right side out. So I'm at my ironing board because the next step says to clip the corners, flip this right side out, and then press it with your iron, which very literally is just pressing a hot iron down on it to flatten all of your pieces and your seams and get them nice and even. That way, whenever we sew them together in the middle, we don't have any bubbling and stuff. So to clip your corners, like it says, you're just going to snip sideways across the corner like that. And this is just going to help you be able to push out the corners and make them nice and squared off once this is right side out. Push the little fuzzies out of the way. All right, so we're going to go to our opening. And where you're going to open this is between, don't know if I have very good light here, between the two page pieces. So not between your batting. You don't want to split that or anything. So between your two page pieces. And then you're just going to roll it towards you. Like that. Just like flipping a sock right side out. Might take a little bit of fidgeting to get it through there. Okay, and then now you are going to, if you left your hole big enough for your hand, which mine is, I'm just going to shove my whole hand in there and I am going to push out these corners. Just like that. On the three sides that we sewed. Now the last corner is where we're going to have to hand stitch. Okay, pulling my hand back out. So this is what our piece looks like right side out. We have, of course, our opening down here, bottom corner. But this is one page and then your next page. So in the book, they'll be folded like this. It'll open up. You'll have like this, then writing, another picture, and then you'll flip and then there'll be writing again. So now it says to press it. What I'm going to do though is this open section, I'm going to go ahead and fold it over to where those stitch lines meet and make it even with the rest of this line. And I'm just going to pin that and then I'm going to press it. That way the iron holds this opening where it needs to be and it doesn't look wonky once we hand sew it. So I'm going to go grab my pins and do that. Okay, so I stuck my pins in, and if you pin vertically like this rather than horizontally running them long ways, you can actually just take the iron over these as long as you don't hit the plastic heads on your pins. So my iron is good and hot, and now it is time to just press this. So nice and pressed. No more wrinkles. I'm going to go ahead and just do the other side also. For good measure. Okay, so here is one set of inside pages that are ready for us to hand stitch. So I'm going to do this to the cover and the other set of inside pages, and then we will be ready to move on to the hand stitching. The pattern calls for a whip stitch, which is just on the outside going around and around. I'm actually going to show you how to do a ladder stitch, which is known as an invisible stitch. That way the part that you hand sewed just blends in with the part that you sewed on your sewing machine, and you don't get any kind of weird wonky corners on there. Alright, I do apologize. I thought I was filming whenever I was doing my ladder stitch and ended up realizing my camera was not on. So, I'm going to show you on this scrap piece of fabric how to do the ladder stitch. On your book, you are starting in a corner. So, pretending this is the corner of the book. What I did was I just went through both sides of the fabric. Brought it out, and then I just split the yarn at the end where it is tied in a knot and stuck my needle through there to kind of loop it around. So the fabric on the book has these little dash lines. There's our black. Since this is a maroon fabric, I drew mine in white. But what you're going to do is run sideways along where that dashed line is that you sewed on with the machine. So I have my first sideways stitch, and you want to hold the two sides that you're closing together where they're going to be once they're sewn. And the reason for that is the ladder stitch is called a ladder stitch because it looks like you are making these steps on a ladder. So wherever my thread came out over here, I want to start it in that same exact place along the dashed line on this side. And then you see it makes like a step on a ladder. So same thing, I came out here on this side, over here on this side of the fabric. I'm going to put it in directly parallel to where it came out over here. And that makes like another step. And you just keep doing that all the way down those dashed lines until you get that little corner of your book sewn. And what happens is as you go, you'll pull that thread tight. And it creates a seam that looks like it was sewn on the machine. You can't see the stitching. And so you will just do that all the way down. I'll do a couple more. It also helps if you pull as you go, like that. So I made a stitch there. Then I would come to my other side here, right across, make my next rung, pull that one, and then just continue to work your way down. And the hand sewn invisible stitch seam or ladder stitch, however you want to name it, will blend in with the seam that you made on your sewing machine, and you won't see anything on the outside. I just think it looks a little bit cleaner. The pattern tells you to do a whip stitch. Now if you want to follow the pattern directly, a whip stitch is just sticking your needle through both sides and coming around, making another stitch, coming around like this, and it makes like a little loop on the outside of the fabric. I didn't want mine done that way because the rest of the book had this nice clean machine sewn seam that was on the inside. I didn't want thread showing on my corner, so that's why I chose to do the invisible stitch seam. That way it would blend, but how you finish your little corner that you flipped it inside out with, or right side out with, that's completely up to you. So once all of your pieces have had the corners sewn, I just went ahead and pressed again on the corner that I hand sewed, and then you have to lay them together in the order that they go in. So obviously your cover piece goes on the outside or on the bottom of the stack or top, however you want to stack them. So then your next page that goes down goes with the cardinal picture here on the downside. So it's the set of pages that has the stockings were hung by the chimney. And then the next page is this one that goes on top of it, and that one goes with the picture of the fire and the Christmas tree down. So the very inside of the book should look like this. And if you flip through to help you make sure that they're in the correct order, when you open up your cover, you have Was the Night Before Christmas, just shows you the house. Then it says the stockings were hung, and you have the picture of the stockings at the fireplace. Then it's As I Drew in My Head, and it says he came down the chimney. There it shows him coming through the chimney. Your next page, which I have pinned right now, is he had a bundle of toys on his back, and so then your picture is Santa taking the toys out. And then your very final page is where he is leaving, and then there he is in his sleigh with his reindeer taking off and waving goodbye. So if that helps you, whenever it's folded, that is the order that it should be in. And I'm going to sew mine with the cover facing up, because the cover does have that stitching down the middle to show me where I'm going to be at. I did switch and put a black thread for my top thread on my machine, since that's what's going to be on the top, is this black background. But you don't have to do that. If it helps you to follow, to use a contrasting color of thread, you can do that as well. Okay, my Microtex needle was not big enough around to go through my book. It was starting to bend, so I swapped it for a leather needle, which is a size 18, I believe it said, 18 gauge. That Microtex needle I was using, I think, was either a 10 or a 12 gauge. So you may, if you used 2 layers of batting, you might need to swap out the needle that you use. Just depends on how thick your book is. Another thing, when you're sewing really thick things, I'm just using my fingers to kind of smash this down and make it thinner. And sewing slower. Even though your machine might have the power to go through it, sometimes sewing too fast through something really thick will cause your machine to skip some stitches, or still cause your needle itself to get hung up. So if your machine's having some trouble, try just slowing down the speed that you sew at. And on that note also, aside from just running the machine slower, you can too use your hand wheel over here on the machine, and you can manually roll your needle down and up through some really thick areas of fabric if you feel safer doing that, or if it gives you better control doing it that way. And then I'm just going to give myself a couple of back stitches at the very end. And then I sewed right off the edge. So here is my line on the outside. And then on the inside, I used thread that matched the tan that's here. So now I'm just going to flip through, make sure that it didn't sew over any of my writing. I can take that pin out now. And it looks like we are good. I did get a little bit of that top thread bunching underneath at the top of the book because I forgot that I had my feed dogs down from trying to use a quilting foot. So this is the finished product. All I did was once this was completely sewn, I went ahead and heated up my iron and I just pressed this one last time as a completed piece. Of course, Ginger thinks that it's for her. But I just think this is so pretty. I love the illustrations that they have on the pages in this book. Especially this one with the little dog laying there. And there you have your completed Night Before Christmas fabric book. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me with the YouTube algorithm, also helps other people be able to see my video. Feel free to share this video with someone who is new to sewing or who you think might be interested in it, and I will see all of you in my next one.